You are listening to Ras Temari Radio, Offense Necessary, where we discuss everything but politics. We're here with two very good friends of the show, Iman. Hi, Iman.
Hi, how are you?
Thanks for being on. And Mika.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you both for coming on. So there's three of us today, and we have a general idea. So first of all, Mika already made a very nice contribution to our station by suggesting that one of the ways to prompt the discussion, since we're here talking about self-education, and in particular the relationship between the modern, the foreign, and the traditional and the uniquely Ethiopian, to start off by asking the question, what did you teach yourself? Correct?
Yeah.
What did you teach? So please start us off, Mika. What have you taught yourself, or what have you taught yourself recently in particular?
This might come as a shock. I do this for a living. I taught myself graphic design. A little bit of story about that. I'm a system developer by training. I studied information science, but through that time, I gravitated towards the experience side of system development, and then that led me to kind of focus on experience-centric systems, which led to my passion to graphic design, and then learning graphic design by tutorials. So this is around 10 years ago, so there was like predominantly dial-up internet connection, so it wasn't as predominant as it is right now. Sorry about that. So learning design, I fell in love with the idea of stories and telling stories in an engaging way, so that people kind of make a connection, even though it seems dead. Like when we think of systems, especially when it comes to tech, we kind of have a connotation that says that it's dead, like computers don't think, but we still think of brands and systems as humans. So focusing on the human side of things became a big drive onto what I do. So
is this similar to sort of what they call HCI, human-computer interaction, or is that a different kind of set of interests? When you talk about the way humans think, computers think, and how it relates to human thought process.
That is one interest of mine, but what I was referring to was more of so whenever we're having a normal conversation, we look at things as dead, right? So a brand is dead for us. It's just a company. When we think of a computer is dead for us. It's just a machine that you turn on and off. But then when you see how we use it, we're going live on our cell phones. We're having a conversation through the computer, and we look at it as an assistant. Just like Adi says in the house, the systems kind of come into human, like they have a human image that we have inside our heads. So designing them in such a way that they interact with us as humans is a better experience than designing it as a dead machine that gives you input and output. I hope that made sense.
It could be also the fact that we make it human by our very interaction with it. I think that's what you're going for as well, is like our very interaction with that thing that we call dead makes it alive.
Yeah.
We give it life, kind of give it life force in a way.
Definitely. The way the role it plays in our life, and even how we think about it, has transcended the idea of machines and then has become into a human. So the philosophy of designing from that principle gives better systems that people use lovingly and, that last longer. Things change through time, but then the connotations we have in our heads makes them last longer or shorter. So I guess what I'm trying to say is systems are designed in a way that it's like A to B, and it's a bit lifeless, so to speak. So looking at them as lively components gives you a better system that people would love, and thus would give you more success and would give more meaning to people's day-to-day life. So I think that was the kind of perspective.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's funny because we had a conversation about this. I think it was with one of the episodes with Ras Temari. You know who Noam Chomsky is?
Yeah.
Noam Chomsky. So Noam Chomsky kind of makes his breakthrough in the 50s. He's still alive. The guy who was responsible for the Chomsky Revolution in the 50s is well into his 90s. Mostly known for his radical and anti-imperialist political writings, starting in the 60s. But in the 50s, as a young man, he had this breakthrough, the Chomsky Revolution, where, among other things, he was reacting to the idea, we talked about this in the context of our theme, Mahayim.
Yeah.
Where everything is social conditioning, right? Because John Locke, who's also known as a political theorist, John Locke from the Enlightenment had this idea of the tabula rasa, the clean slate. The human mind is a clean slate, and everything is environment. Everything is nurture. basically, in reaction to pre-modern thought, which was everything is one way or another nature, right? So Noam Chomsky comes along and makes us realize, well, actually it's a subtle interaction between the two, because the child's mind, contrary to what Locke thought, is actually like a grammatical genius. Right? You've been around 3-year-olds, especially when it comes to language, and there are these incredibly complex processes of language that have to do with the processes of the mind, and this is also during the time when computers are being invented. Right? So there are all these disciplines, and this changed everything in terms of linguistics, in terms of literary theory, but there are all these ways in which psychology, neuroscience, child rearing, pedagogy, and language arts, literature, literary theory, and all that are actually interrelated and need to. And this is a discovery that was key in terms of the advancement of computers as well.
Yeah, that school of thought really influences what I do, and I have found it very effective, so to speak. People relate to stories. People don't relate to entities as much as they relate to stories. Mm-hmm. And we love stories because they give us connotation, they give us meaning. You could see yourself inside a story. You can't see yourself inside a machine, but you can see yourself more inside a...
So we kind of need that emotional attachment to whatever brand we're trying to develop. I think. Yeah. And it also brought up something for me. What if it's a mix of both? What if it's like for a purely logical person or someone who calls themselves very left-minded? There's things that are bare and very practical and very logical make more sense than things that you can emotionally relate to. But people who are more right-brained find it easier to relate to a story if it's emotional and it connects to their life and things like that. So combining those two things kind of gives you a different kind of structure, like a different type.
Yeah, but like when you really think about it, so I'm biased when I say this because I identify myself as a right-brainer. I'm all about the flares and possibilities, but when you really think about it, the things we consider practical have a certain emotional value, even though we justify it as a rational or logical thing. It's like, for me, the color black is practical. As I would consider that a left-brain decision, but then I like it because it's dark, it just makes you mute, and all of those things have emotional value. So I might be biased when I'm saying this, but I think that yes, the combination is great, but we really emphasize on the emotional side of things, even though we justify it as left brain kind of reasoning or making things broken down into logic. It really has that emotional value built into it. Yeah. So to put it in simple terms is, you would not lose if you kind of target the emotional side of the system. Yeah.
I don't think you can actually separate those two at all. Right. It's like there's this idea that separating those concepts and separating yourself as either logical or emotional or right-brained or left-brained, they think a lot of people have thought for a long time that we had to balance these two things, but not necessarily, because integration is how we're built. We're both right-brained and left-brained, and each part gets triggered depending on the environment we're in. It would be easier to be a left-brain person if you're in school or at work and stuff like that, or when you're with your friends, you're more right-brained, you're more emotional, you interact in that kind of way. So I think we should take that whole balance concept out of the picture and kind of come back to integrating those two sides and kind of finding the common ground where we can all operate.
Usually thoughts are associated with emotions, so they have emotions attached to them and vice versa. And that's an intricate kind of process. So Iman, tell us, what is something that you have taught yourself recently?
Okay, so I have taught myself. So I was educated in law school in Addis Ababa University, but while I was taking my education, I used to focus a lot on psychology because that's what I originally wanted to do. So throughout my 5 years of law school, I taught myself psychology. I used to study a lot of psychology books. As soon as I left college, I joined Addis Ababa, which is an online news platform, and I had to also teach myself how to write. How to write in a professional way, because I've always journaled. I do poetry in English, and I did some articles in Amharic, but I'm not very good at writing in Amharic. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's hard. Amharic is not good.
But so I had to teach myself how to write professionally, and then I went into that, and then a little later on, I went into customer service. So I would say writing and psychology is something that I taught myself. Like, I still do. And it's topics that I find very interesting. And holistic healing as well. So I had to practice and study a lot about that. And yeah,
it's quite an array of interests and of experiences. For someone who's really just getting started.
I was actually curious, like, how was the customer service related with your inclination with psychology? Like, did you find the principles that you studied
valuable? Yes, very much, because when you're dealing with customers, you're basically dealing with different types of people, and the study of psychology is all about that. It's about people and the way the mind works. And you can't always expect a person to be nice to you, or you can't always expect a person not to be nice to you. It depends on what they're going through, what their background is. So in order to give the best kind of customer service I possibly can, I had to take all of that into account, like what kind of day they might have had, what they've went through, and like how am I going to approach them, and what kind of way of speaking would they actually respond to, because I've had customers who just wanted direct information immediately. They didn't want you to explain. If you explain, you're like, do you think I'm dumb? I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. That's like
walking you through the process.
I'm going to add one thing that is really interesting thing that a relative of mine who's been in the service industry in the U.S. and U.S. have this intense customer service culture where the customer's always right? Yeah. So you have to put up with all kinds of crap. And she said, and also it was a tip-based business, so it's really about your money. Is it was about. And she said it this way. She said, you don't treat people how you want to be treated. So you don't want to treat people the way you want to be treated. No. You treat people how they want to be treated. Because everybody wants to be treated differently. Some people, if you're serving at the table, they want to be left alone. Some people want you to talk to them. Some people, you know what I mean? And you have to read that situation and kind of carry them. That's
I learned that the hard way, by the way. My first job was, I was an intern at ECX, and my job was providing IT support. So usually, because I spent a lot of time on computers, some of the errors, I sound sarcastic. I did not know this. Like, I learned this later on. The issues they're having might be simple in my head, but then, like, it's a real deterministic, like, it determines bigger results on their end. So
nobody likes to be talked down to by somebody smarter than them. And if you're they're calling you because you're smarter than them, because they failed at something. And sarcasm doesn't. It's not.
So I had to walk people, like, through the steps, and I had to make sure that I sound serious. Yeah. So it really creates a huge difference. Like, you treat, like, the mainstream saying is, like, treat others and to, like, you want to be treated. But when it comes down to, like, providing support, people want to be treated their own way. Everybody has a self-image, and they want that self-image to be extended or portrayed in the context that you're dealing with them, rather than what you bring to the table.
Yeah. I think this is a nice segue into a conversation we were having earlier. Because the conversation we were having earlier, I overheard you and our producer talking about Cowboy Bebop, I think it was, and we were talking about an episode that I saw many years ago, where, if the people don't know Cowboy Bebop, it's like a manga kind of thing, a dystopian society in which people in the future want to live forever.
Yeah.
So they store their consciousness or their spirit, their soul, whatever it is, onto beams of data that go over a city, kind of like power lines do.
Yeah.
And at first, this is to achieve immortality, and people talk about this in different experiences. The singularity or whatever. Hooking our minds up to the internet and all being one, and replacing our body parts with. So the idea is achieving immortality, which sounds great, except that a disembodied, permanent existence as a data beam that's conscious but has no control over anybody also sounds like very dystopian, as in like that's a hellish kind of experience.
Yeah.
And Iman, you said something interesting about how on some level this might already be in terms of thoughts or in terms of certain experience or mood. Possibly these floating beams of consciousness or of emotion are already what surrounds us in the current time.
Like, we have this attachment to thoughts. Like, whenever we have a thought, it's like, my thought, I thought about this. Like, it's my idea. I think it's a lack of separating idea and implementation, and idea as it comes to your mind. Because I don't actually believe thoughts are individually your own. They are actually these beams of light, and they pop up to you. It depends on what you do with them.
Yeah.
It's like if you take that thought and actually put it into action, or even have a conversation about it with friends around you, they will have another thought that's a particular idea that's similar to yours, and they will always implement it based on their own perspective and their own experiences. Yeah.
My business partner, I definitely relate. I just think he articulated it the best way. I wish it was my idea. But
that's why he's your partner, right?
Yeah,
Your partner with the right guy.
So he says that a good idea is like rain. It's given to a lot of people at the same time. And some people kind of act on it. Some people talk about it. Some people don't even see it happen. It's like, you could ignore rain if you're like, if your head is somewhere else, right? So it happens on developing brands and systems, because whenever we make a connection between 2 points, it could be like a problem and a solution. Because of the exciting nature of that idea, you think it's yours and you're the only one having it. And the same goes for problems as well. Like, you might understand that some of the things in life might be less meaningful than what you were led to believe, and then you think like that association was made only by you, and you don't even talk to people about it. You don't get a chance to act on it. So when it comes to ideas or any sort of knowledge, I feel that it's given to a lot of people, but some people, like, we're systems. We were mentioning this example with the flash drive. So it could be a file on a flash drive. When you put it on a Mac, it gives it a different interpretation. The other machine, like it could be a Windows machine. Sorry, my nerd kicks in every now
No,
and
not
then.
at all.
It's a part of you.
Yeah.
It's a part of
I know you're an IT guy, but I think we all know what a Windows machine is. You didn't lose us there. Yeah, go ahead.
So the machines being people. So imagine if the file on the flash drive is an idea. So a good idea might be given. So for right now, the idea of sharing is actually becoming more and more predominant, and seeing the human in others. So it seems like a new idea. Whenever you got that revelation, it seems like it's only yours and you came up with it, and everything is just related to you. But it's revealed into a lot of people at the same time. And based on the context, it could be just space. It could be the people you hang out with. It's a combination of a lot of things, and combinations, just like chemistry, exist in multiple places at once.
Everything is the same, even if it's different. That's what they say in the film I Heart Huckleberries, right? It's the idea of the unified field of consciousness. Underlying everything, we're all on this one plane of consciousness. And we all experience the same things, but it's expressed in completely individual. So we're all exactly the same, but even if we're different, right? We talked about this in another sense earlier when we were talking about stand-up comedy. Right? We were talking about stand-up, and specifically observational comedy. Jerry Seinfeld and others. People sitting in a room laughing together at some very mundane little detail in life, and of course he captures it with his specific sound and rhythm and delivery. Delivery, and the way it's all very, very plotted out, and it's perfectly timed. But what he's doing is going, hey, that little moment, I'll give you an example. It's not a Seinfeld, but it's an observational comedy thing. They'll use you ever notice, and he'll, one book it'd be like, you brush your teeth before you drink orange juice in the morning. You make the mistake of reversing the process, where you brush your teeth before, and the orange juice and the toothpaste combines to make that icky taste. And everybody in the room laughs because it's like, wait a second, I thought that was just me. Wait, that was just me. That was just me. And everybody's laughing because underlying their very individual, very particular experience of life is an underlying kind of universal experience.
Definitely.
I think it could also be that like it's not new, but it's new to you. So whatever's new to you is like new to your environment.
And
depending on the environment.
So go ahead.
Depending on the environment that you're in. Like if you're around people who are mythological, and if you talk about mythological things, then that's not new. They'll give you more ideas, and that will be new to you. But if you're around people who are based on like the third dimensional life at like a workspace and stuff like that, and you mention something like this, it's a new concept. They'll push against you, or they'll try to understand you more because it's new to them. So it's always everything that's new is new to you and based on your perspective, or like the environment's perspective of what it is.
I mean, mythology is interesting on another level. First of all, people use the term myth as in myth is falsehood. Oh, that's just a myth. But myth is actually about truth. It's about explaining universal and often natural phenomena when we don't have the existence of science. It also is about social mobilization, right? You deploy a myth for the goal of
Moving
mobilizing
people
society,
towards
and we were
something.
just talking about this in the context of film. We were talking about the Man from Earth, but how, and I know this might be offensive to people or religious, but this is why we use the tagline "offense necessary." Right? Sometimes it's necessary to be provocative or offensive. Not that that's our goal from the beginning, but like the idea that mythology easily and astrology and the personification of the stars easily informs both monotheistic and polytheistic religions, as well as other systems of belief. So that myth, legend, history, reality, fictions of different kinds, religions and different kind of ideologies, all kind of feed on each other, and they'll often disparage each other.
Yeah.
Right? They'll deploy the iconography of a religion that they're reacting to or challenging, either to appropriate it or to disparage it as the iconography of the devil, to associate it with the devil.
Yeah.
But all this is to say, the mythology works into all of these other things in a variety of ways.
Yeah. The thing about myth is the age and the fact that it was made, it was designed to move people, gives us the connotation that it's false, but it's not. It just moves people. But then the connotation of it being fiction or false has become dominant. That whenever we hear the word, we think that it's a lie. But it's a story that gravitated to through time, that started out as moving people and actually a lot of people kind of believing the same idea. But then through time, we've grown to distrust a bit of myth because, well, now we could actually say that it's the age of debunking, right? Because of the advancements in science, technology, and connectedness, we can kind of verify or challenge anything. It's like the latest one was the roundness of Earth.
Right, there's now the flat earthers. Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about? People are now challenging the idea that the Earth is round. Right?
Yeah, it's
Right.
it's the season, it's the era where we challenge everything.
Everything.
We're free
Right,
to challenge
There's a
everything.
book about this
Yeah,
called
yeah,
"The Death of Expertise," right? And social media has kind of played into this. And now with the virus, this is actually having deadly effects potentially. That nobody trusts anybody, and everybody's opinion is kind of equal, to the point that the people are literally challenging. One of our fundamental realizations 500 years ago, that the world is not just circular
Round,
but
yeah.
actually spherical, right? But that says something. It's like really an extreme form of that. That conspiratorial or paranoid or at the very least, willingness to challenge authority when it comes to knowledge.
So what's real to you might not also be real for someone else. What's myth to you is a reality or a belief system for someone else.
Right.
So
it's highly subjective.
yes, it's highly subjective, which brings us into perspective. The idea of perspective that we talked about is everybody has their own perspective and their way of life and their way of going about things. So I might hear a certain concept and say, oh, that's just a myth.
Yeah.
But for someone, that's their actual reality. That's their
Right.
belief
It's the pillar
system.
of
Yes.
life, yeah.
Their pillar
And
of
that
life.
kind
And
of offense.
offend someone,
right.
yes.
And I mean, when we say offend, literally we're talking about clashes between religions, like wars, crusades, world wars, is based on that very minor issue of hey, I think that's a myth. I don't really buy that ideology or that religion.
Everybody's the center of their universe. I think the show being Ras Temari, let me tell you guys a story. So learning graphic design is a bit hard, especially in the Ethiopian context. So you don't know where to begin. The people you can actually follow, back then Behance was not a big deal. People don't know it as these days. And the people that actually go on Behance get intimidated because it's people who design for Nike and a whole bunch of other big brands, right? So we thought about everybody's in the dark. Everybody's the only designer in their head.
Oh, yeah.
And they don't have a teacher that walks them through, or they don't have someone that they can even showcase their work to. So this became the foundation for a design community me and a friend of mine called Dawit created, called Arif Designs. So the idea behind it was very simple. Everybody's in the dark when it comes to learning graphic design in Ethiopia. So the idea became, what if there was a platform where people can share their work, get feedback, and also learn, get a chance to mentor others? Because even though it's a really dark and heavy ride going up the ladder of learning to design, you also need a place to breathe. everything starts with the passion to kind of create and share with the world, right? So it became the foundation for the community. It's still ongoing, and we've had a lot of amazing experiences. Like we were fortunate enough to meet with some people that we really admired, and dare I say, stalked a little bit. So, and we also got a chance to teach some people, and we learned a lot. So everybody's the center of their universe, and everybody thinks that they're the only one. And unless you kind of create a platform such as this, or Arif Designs and all the other options, people kind of live and die with a single idea. And it becomes a very resentful part of their belief system that they can't let go, but they can't even share it with the rest of the world. So I think there are a lot of barriers with the idea that we think we're alone. I like the saying that's called, the more personal, the more universal. It's like when something makes you feel insecure, it feels like you're the only one going through it. But, you know, when you share it, you start to understand that, like you mentioned on the observational comedy. It's like, what was that joke? It's like stuff. So, you know, there's this bit by George Carlin, the God rest his soul, the legendary comedian. He starts his show by talking about stuff. So, you know how we collect stuff? Like, we buy things and then so we get a house to put all our stuff in it. And then there's a vacation. And then when we go to so he does it so much better. I'm just telling you the
right. You just keep everything is about moving your stuff. Right?
Yeah.
It's stuff from one place. You're defined by your things kind of thing.
Yeah, everybody kind of defines themselves by the stuff that they have on them, and then whenever they have to make a move, like they go on a vacation, and then when so he mentions the destination Maui. So when you arrive at Maui, you just take enough stuff to last you a weekend over Maui, and then you go to a friend of yours calls you, and then, hey, why don't you come onto the island for the weekend?
Stuff.
And then you gotta pick stuff.
I remember that. Yeah, so it's like a really famous. It's a really famous one.
Yeah, he opens his show with it. It's just that, like, we go through it every day. It's just that we never had someone to put the story in one lane or share it with people that enough to know that everybody goes through it. So I think that the idea of perspectives and how we consider like stories very personal, and then what happens when we share them is very fascinating.
And it's very helpful, right? So because the less narcissistic you are, the more you open up and realize every problem you've ever have had, probably tens of millions, if not billions of people have had it before you, and will continue to have it every, and that kind of makes it okay, right? It's dealing with. We were talking about this with Haben from Gastadam in our last episode, when she was nice enough to come on here. We're talking about how traveling also helps that, because you see as people living so many different kinds of lives that you feel insignificant. And as it turns out, feeling insignificant is never a bad thing, right? There was an old ad, CNN had an ad like that in the 90s with the guy who discovered the HIV virus, and they had other whole campaign around it. Feeling insignificant, right? Feeling small is actually the most healing kind of thing. Potentially, it also allows us to transition to the discussion that we were talking about, the concept of the gypsy, right? You used the term Ethiopian gypsy, right? Iman,
yes, my Instagram handle.
Right. Right. What do you mean by that?
Okay, for me, Ethiopian gypsy has connotations that are related to my family. I personally like traveling, and so did my father. And I started naming myself Ethiopian gypsy after that. And gypsy, the term is a lot of things for a lot of people.
Right.
For me personally, is mythical being and also like someone who likes to travel around a lot, is not very attached to a particular place. So for me, the world is my home, not just Ethiopia. I mean, I was born and raised here, but the world is my home, which also takes me back to the concept is like, I think we should think of ourselves not just as an individual, but as a unified consciousness where we're all one being. I think we lack open-mindedness when we think our individual perspective is the only one that matters and the only one that we should go by. And we stop associating other people's experiences with our own experiences, because if they are in our environment, that is your experience, right? So, That's
I mean, it's also it's individual expression of that unified field. Right? We are still individuals, right?
Yeah.
We are always all of us trapped within that one mind. By the way, can I just say another wonderful example of this whole conversation? A lot of this comes up in like 19th century Russian literature, like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, self and other, self and other. I recommend everybody listen to a clip that you can find on YouTube called "This Is Water" by the famous American writer David Foster Wallace. This is a few years before his suicide, where he talks about the importance of how water, he defines water, like we're fish is going through water, and our water is really our understanding that everybody experiences, the same kind of thing, and that we are insignificant, but in a way that. But I want to get back to this idea. I want to get back to this idea of the gypsy, right? The gypsy, because it's an interesting thing, right? It's a dual kind of meaning, right? On the one hand, nomadic is what you mean by it. Now, you said it means different things to different people, because I mentioned that in the U.S. and possibly people with the more foreign or modern experience of this, with the rise of political correctness, I think you said, Mika, this is traced back to the 60s?
Yeah, mid-16th century. Like the term gypsy was supposed to mean Egyptian. That's how we started.
Right,
yeah.
it starts off with meaning Egyptian. And now, if you say gypsy, especially in a college or university in the U.S., where people are very careful about these things, it's an insult, and the real term you're supposed to use is Roma. So this is an ethnic group, along with another diffuse ethnic group that had a major diaspora and that was blamed for everything, Jewish people. By the way, we had Danny on the show talking about Jews and the history of being scapegoated and whatnot. But these are the two groups that Hitler really targeted, right? So I think he killed like 1 million gypsies or Roma. But that term, it's not just an ethnic group, right? It's also the idea of somebody who is dispersed or somebody who is a social outcast. And we related it to the dual meanings of Baria.
Yeah.
Right? Baria in Amharic means somebody who's low class, somebody who's dark, and it's a term of disparagement, but it could also be like the N-word, a term of affection when appropriated. And then the roots of both gypsy and Baria, actually of the gypsies as a group, not the term, but the gypsies, because the Egyptian thing is a misappropriation, is actually India, right? And Baria is also from South India, is the darker people who are outcasts on it, and it makes its way into English as pariah, right? Somebody who's a social outcast, or someone who's socially undesirable. So it is interesting that like ethnic groups are like specific people, or the way they're treated or misappropriated, misunderstood. People come from there. Also becomes like a term for somebody who's an outcast or somebody who's a nomadic person. So this kind of is recurring.
It's usually based on the label. People like putting labels on things just so they can understand them. It's like you need a label to say that you know about a certain thing, so you can attach different details to it. So like when you take the label off of whatever that thing is, it's actually the same thing to everyone. It's just expressed in different ways. So like I think the term gypsy is a label, and that label could mean different things to different people as in different perspectives. But the label, when you detach that label, we all kind of share a gypsy like way of being, right? We all have a little bit of a gypsy inside of us, where like maybe our ideas are the things that travel, maybe our emotions or our experience travels in different places, or we believe in magic, and magic may be science for us at the same time. So yeah, if you just label
the universal contained within the particular, the individual, what we keep getting back to in this conversation.
It's fascinating that you bring that up. I was actually frustrated with stereotypes. I had an official season of being frustrated with stereotypes. And what got me through that time was the understanding that, you know about heuristics?
Heuristics.
So heuristics is
with time, right?
It means rule of thumb. So back from the survival days, we needed to make sure that we process the inputs, the sensory inputs, in an efficient way. So you can't process everything. You kind of get used to something, like the studio's a bit like hotter than room temperature, but now that we're into the
it does get hot.
It's the ideas.
So as soon as we get into the conversation, the heat kind of spreads away, even though our senses are like receiving the input, right? So for me, the idea that got me through that time that I mentioned was we can't process everything, so we're programmed to only look at the outstanding things. So then we process concepts with the distinguishing attributes. So, for instance, take the gypsy example take the gypsy concept, for example. So gypsies were known to travel and being nomadic people, and that was the unique part about them. Yes, they're people. Yes, they're like, it's a community and everything. But because we have a lot of communities in our heads, we emphasized on the unique part of it, which was having moving around a lot and not being attached. And then that becomes the emphasis. Emphasis grows into what's the word? Connotation. So now, whenever we hear, like you said, the label of gypsy, we think of the unique attributes. And then through that time, we kind of lose track of the foundation. Gypsies are people, and the term gypsy stands for a unique attribute of moving around rather than being a certain race of people.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So it kind of evolves, and that's how ideas evolve as well. Like the earlier thing that we were mentioning, whenever you discover an idea, you think it's yours, and then the more it stays, like it's only yours, and then you would feel like that entire creation was yours because you're the center of your universe. But then when you share it, you'd feel like it kind of grows, and you weren't the only one.
Yeah.
How many people arrive at ideas when they think are brilliant, like it's like, oh my, breakthrough in advertising, well, they only to realize somebody else came up with it already. Right? It's been patented. We had a whole conversation about patents earlier. I don't know if we want to continue. Or let's continue with this idea, because this also addresses a theme that we start off with, or the idea is for us to start off, which is mesayim, right? Titles, introductions, labels, brands, how people present themselves, and how that's usually the first thing that a person is judged on. It's the first thing that could be used against you if there's any kind of flaw or any kind of like hole in that structure of the brand. But we were talking about it in terms of patents and IP. So do you want to take this, Iman? Talking about what we're dealing with in this country right now, with your background as a lawyer in terms of patent law and intellectual property.
Yeah. So intellectual property is a little funny in Ethiopia. I find it funny because it's not as strong as it should be. It's not as strong as it is in like American and all the other sectors. And when I was learning it, I was actually in a draft format. The main intellectual property law was in a draft format where they had different ideas of how it should be. We have a copyright proclamation, and then we have a proclamation for patents individually, but the full book of intellectual property is still in a draft format. So because of that, we have to pay attention to different proclamations just to like figure out what type of patents we have, and the problem it causes with creativity and trying to like put your idea into a brand and trying to keep that brand is you can't actually own it unless it's not about how you created it, or it's more about who went through the bureaucracy stage, who did the actual work and actually got that writing down, and that says like, yeah, you own this idea. Yeah. You have to get someone to sign off on the fact that you own the particular idea you came up with.
And you don't just own the name or the idea or the brand, but as a result, you end up owning the product as well.
Yes, the product itself is what defines what someone owns. Right. Like if it's an idea, if it's like music, for example, you can't actually patent music, that's copyright. But so it's like, let's go with this one for now because it's easier to explain. So if it's, you have this particular music that you came up with, you feel you came up with, you might be inspired by different things, but you came up with this thing, and then once you try to share that with different people, it could be through social media, or you could be sharing it with, you made your whole album and stuff like that. But when you're actually trying to share it with people, there's someone else that will be there like, yo, I had that idea and I already got it patented. Right. I already got the copyright for it. So you have to give it back. Everything you've gained from that is mine. Is mine. And
that's
then
the current law? Is that the current law? If that were to happen, that person then takes all of the
If a person goes to the place where they need to get registered and get their ideas registered, then they own it. Every kind of profit that anybody gains from that is theirs because it's been registered. That's the law. So it makes it hard for creativity, and it makes it hard for people to like share different types of ideas, different types of art, different things in this in our country, because it's very discouraging to share your ideas, because you feel like somebody is going to take all the profit after you've done all the hard work, just
everybody
because you have it.
Something here, especially if it's a creative thing. Even this station, I mean, that was
exactly
one of the fears: is who's going to take this? Where do we get licensing here? I mean, it's just part of the process.
So you need a license, and like I think people should really pay attention to the laws that are there. Something that I face a lot in my experiences, like a lot of people in Ethiopia don't pay attention to the laws. They don't even know what laws exist, the particular proclamation that would actually guide whatever creation they're trying to put into the world, put into Addis. So like paying attention to those particular laws will give you a better way, or an easier path to actually keeping the product and also gaining the profits from that product.
And also creating a safe product as well, because there's, you could correct me on this, there's a law that goes along the line of, if it has been used and it has been used under public knowledge, it stands as if they claimed the certificate.
Right.
So
over a certain period of time.
Yeah, I think it's 2 years or so. The numbers you could. But
Okay.
So after a certain time that people know that the brand actually holds legal grounds as of holding the patent certificate. So whenever you're creating a product or naming a brand, being conscious of the intellectual property laws and the status of your idea, because bits and pieces of the idea might be already patented, so you need to consider that person into whatever you're building. So being conscious of the patent laws, it's very defining right now, because a lot of entrepreneurs are coming into the game and a lot of creatives are joining the creative industry. Being conscious of intellectual property laws actually decides the sustainability of your idea. You might be building something, like we mentioned earlier, whenever you come up with something new, you think it's yours and you're the only one who has it, and then you build an entire company on top of it, and then a company comes in with the intellectual property grounds to take all your profit and actually sue you as well.
Yes.
You had an experience with this too, right? Where somebody tried to have you subsidize under them when you started a company because they had a brand that was similar to yours, right? As if the brand is the product,
So the idea is there's a radio show with the same name. Our brand was an e-commerce brand, and it was based on apparel. That it didn't have anything to do with entertainment, nor the brand there we're mentioning. So when we went there, they told us that it should be a subsidiary of that brand. And we asked, did they apply for the patent? No. It's just that the brand has been out there and is under public knowledge. So they
and neither of you intended this. This is just like accidentally that you arrived at the same
sector.
Brand. Right. Right. But this person failed to get you to substitute to have
No.
your
We kind of had lawyers and stuff,
Right.
but it was the hard way. And I don't think that we were just fortunate, to be honest. Like we were working with the law office at the time, so we just asked them for advice, and they took the project as pro bono for us to get it done. But not everybody's fortunate enough to do that, and because it's becoming more and more relevant, I think that intellectual property laws have been revised, and I think it's near the final stages. So being conscious of it, especially as a creative, gives you something that's sustainable. I don't know if you guys heard, it was a big deal on Capital at some point in time. A lot of our bank logos were...
Capital, the newspaper?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're taken from brands in the same sector, and internationally speaking, you can't have the same thing under the same sector. Part of the intellectual property laws is protecting the customer, so that they don't buy
they don't
something.
accidentally. We have this happen all the time. I've tried to work, without naming names, I've tried to work for brands of newspapers that turned out to be a completely different field or a completely different publication. but that we're actually benefiting from just stealing the name and attracting. But this happens in a number of things, or people will accidentally do it. Like they'll come up with a name that's kind of cliched, and they'll go into it, and then they'll realize, oh, now I got to change my brand. I got to change a lot of my marketing strategy because some other, American company has come up.
I think the same thing has happened with Enjoy Burger now. InNOut. It was not meant to be InNOut because that's the thing with intellectual property.
It doesn't even exist on the East Coast. It only exists in California, right? And people, the first thing they tell you if you come from the East Coast of California is you got to try InNOut Burger. It's really way, way, way better than McDonald's or anything like that. But it's just funny that InNOut, which hasn't made it out to Illinois or to New York, exists. And
I think they use that. I think they use the InNOut brand to attract a lot of people from California because, like, whenever you think InNOut, and that's the thing a lot of people use. That's why intellectual property is a little funny here. They use that actual logo to attract those people, and that's not considered a bad thing to do because they don't think it's illegal. A lot of people don't think it's illegal. They don't think it's immoral because it's like a marketing strategy.
Yeah, I think it was abused, but it's so basically whenever you're creating a brand, you're creating a story around a product that the person relates to. Like we mentioned earlier, there's almost zero original ideas. You kind of make variations or iterations of an idea to connect with the customer. So whenever you're advertising or building a brand, you're going to use pre-existing items or pre-existing emotional values. Say, for instance, right now we're all predominantly patriotic. So it's good to come up with a brand name that has the patriotic concept built into it. Now,
I'm a matriarch.
I got you.
Just had to say that.
I dig. So you leverage those feelings, but then people, so I don't represent everybody in the creative industry. Just like every industry, there's a section of people that look for loopholes and then kind of take it as far as they can. So I think that it was done, so it's not professional, but then they abused the professional principle of leveraging pre-existing associations with brands. I remember when InNOut opened up, the major customer base was the diaspora because it kind of created that curiosity, even though it wasn't the same as the InNOut burgers
not even
back
close,
in the US, right?
But even it wasn't just the name, right? The logo, the way the coloring of the
everything was
even the business model of fast food. I also love how in this country, and Pizza Hut has the same problem. Where they want to do fast food, but then they make you go up there and order and then go sit down.
Yeah.
So it's like now I've sat around waiting twice. So it's like completely loses. It's actually slowed down compared to most Ethiopian restaurants. Like it's a longer and more drawn out process. So
and actually more expensive than any other pizza place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Pizza Hut
for the brand. Yeah.
Pizza Hut is more, and I've heard that
Also
in America
Cold Stone,
it's actually pretty cheap.
Well,
right?
so the funny thing about Pizza Hut is, I mean, it's all relative. I mean, Pizza Hut and Domino's, and especially if you've been to Chicago or New York or any of these places, people look down on it like this is crap that they sell in Middle America, right? Here, it's a different kind of brand. But Pizza Hut is different than McDonald's. So one of the reasons McDonald's doesn't exist in sub-Saharan Africa is that they have this very rigorous thing attached to their brand. Like every McDonald's is exactly right the same way. And if they can't provide that necessary, if they're not 100%, they don't want to compromise their brand. Yeah. This is an issue I have in a lot of restaurants here, where I'm like, dude, if it's different, if the quality is different,
it's not a franchise.
But it's also I shouldn't have to, not just franchise, right? I like as a customer, you shouldn't have to come in and pay expecting something and be giving something different each time, right? You have to standardize. Pizza Hut does it differently, right? Pizza Hut, I think, licenses out the name and the branding. So I have the story about going to the Pyramids. The Pyramids was one of the more disappointing experiences in my life. I mean, I built it up too much in my head. It was just, it wasn't, first of all, it's Giza is part of Cairo, essentially. It's in the suburbs. So the whole image of, you're traveling on a camel and you're out in the desert and you see the pyramids. No, it's actually like right next to the highway. And then, I realized that the contents of the pyramids I'd already seen in Paris and in London and in all these museums because they just kind of steal the stuff like the way they do at McDonald's. But, okay, so it was disappointing a lot, but they do a good job of marketing themselves in tourism and all that. that. But the funny thing is, to really highlight in a comic way the disappointment, there's a Pizza Hut right across from the Sphinx.
Wow.
You ever go to Cairo and you ever want, there's a Pizza Hut. I am not much of a cook. I've never made pizza at home. I'm pretty sure I could make a better pizza. The Pizza Hut that I made it, like it was almost like they were trying to make a joke out of like, hey, let's put some quita with some tomato sauce, and this is an official Pizza Hut, right? So there's a huge difference in that business model between licensing out a name and really promoting something versus actually providing it.
Also, the fact that like whenever a place becomes a tourist area, they want to bring a little bit of the city into that tourist area, right? Maybe in the past it was that place where you need to travel on a camel, and they're just trying to take all the work away from it, which makes it a little less beautiful, because the hard work and the challenge is what you want to go through, and then you want to be like, the pyramids, right?
There's always an element of the rural adapted into the urban as an exotic thing, and then there's often elements of the urban adapted into the rural, right? Because if you go to the rural areas in Ethiopia, for instance, everybody's kind of trying to be Addis Ababa, right? Everybody's kind of trying to be there. So they just adopt certain aspects. You see like the urban peeking its head, rearing its head in the rural, and vice versa.
It also ruins the idea of traveling. The whole idea of traveling is actually venturing into the unknown. And when it's all known, where's the, travel?
An authentic experience. Yeah. But some people, I think Americans have this problem in particular, where Americans start really yearning for America very quickly. They get homesick very quickly, right? They're introverted. So, like, I remember going to Europe, and my friends, when they were starting to feel that homesickness, they went to a McDonald's, right? And even, like, American communities, they have their own schools. They have their own. I went to an American school in Senegal, right? They would play their baseball in their little fields, and they would go to their commissaries to get their peanut butter, and they would watch. They didn't really understand French. They didn't want to watch French TV, so they would watch American Forces Network, right? Some people like to, especially if they spend a little bit of time somewhere else, and they have this mentality that Americans, a lot of them have, which is America number one, no other places worth seeing, right? They want to bring, they feel forced to go somewhere else. They want to bring home with them, everywhere they go.
And I think that's why a lot of tourist destinations want to incorporate a little bit of that home that tourists have adapted to, because they do that here too. A lot of the tourist destinations have really nice hotels right next to them and really nice restaurants and stuff like that.
American experiences built into them.
Yes, and I think you need a little bit of that, but just not too much, not enough to take the authentic experience out of what they came there to experience in the first place. Like, you're meant to see the unknown and just go through that, and then it brings you back to knowing that you're actually a part of this earth. We're all unified in our own way. We create different things in different places, and I think that need to bring your home wherever it goes just takes you away from that gypsy experience.
At the same time, I agree with you. But see, this is a delicate thing as well, because another thing I've noticed being around people of European descent or Westerns is, again, this is a theme of the show, the relationship between foreign and domestic, not just in Ethiopia, but throughout Africa, is there's an adventurism, right? There's an adventurism. Sometimes it even takes a sexual dimension, right? Like going to Africa and meeting an exotic member of the former. But it can even take an academic version, like higher level academics, or a humanitarian one, aid workers going out, or a spiritual one, finding the water spirits in some traditional tribe. A lot of academics, like historians, whatever, they're stuck in this quest for authenticity, and they're even self-conscious about it. They know that white people do this, but they can't stop themselves from going out and experiencing the real Africa and the tribes. And on some level, I get what you're saying, right? In that, you do want that authentic experience while it's still there. But at the same time, once you start defining, and this is a major debate, especially among social scientists of Africa, especially abroad, which is modern versus traditional, right? Is the peasant, as Frantz Fanon would say, the peasant the real African? Is there such a thing as the real African? Is the native urban intelligentsia like the devil because they're bought off by the Europeans? Ngugi wa Thiong'o would say so. He literally wrote a book about this called Devils on the Cross, right? And then the other perspective, the modernist, is no. Europeans and colonialists specifically defined us along our, Mahmoud Mamdani has a whole argument about this, specifically defined us along our more traditional customary law, right? The authentic, the indigenous. And again, it's tricky because we want to be authentic, we want to be indigenous, but once they start defining our worst attributes as who we are, then if modernity means science, technology, advancement, development, then we're not supposed to have them. We're not supposed to have electricity either, right? Because we're supposed to be defined by that native, or authentic Africa doesn't have. The other thing is Africa's not a static place. So nothing is static. Everything is changing. Everything has contradictions anyway.
There's growth.
So so going back and trying to find that authentic African past is a bit of a silly.
I think we should make a difference between authentic and ancient, because a lot of the expressions of Africa that I've seen are ancient for me, because it's like things that used to happen at the time where my grandparents were still alive.
Archaic,
Archaic. Yes, exactly. That's the perfect word for it. And when that growth happens, it's not necessarily what you came expecting. You wanted to see like jungles and like people in like short dresses and stuff, and everybody's here in jeans and t-shirts, and you're surprised. Yes.
Well, see, that's another thing. Like when that perception is completely misattributed, there's almost no place in Africa that has jungle. It's almost all around what is now Democratic Republic of Congo, right? We have forests and stuff, but the African jungles, or they'll talk about Africa and they'll have tigers. Like images of tigers are Asian, right? So like the idea that
there are no tigers in Ethiopia
based on somebody's misconception about, but this takes on another role, right? Which is when it comes to practices, especially involving women, harmful gender practices. Often colonialists would define natives based on those practices in order to be like they're savages. So in China, there's foot binding, Chinese foot binding, where they would break the woman's feet in order, because a woman with small feet or whatever was part of their conception of beauty. Okay. And then in Hinduism, in parts of India, there was something called widow immolation, which is really disturbing, right? Where people would die. With the corpse, they wouldn't bury them. They would immolation means burning. They burn the body, and in some practices they would burn the widow alive. They would burn the woman alive with the widow. Again, it's horrible and everything. And people talk about female genital mutilation and some of the practices here, polygamy, and define the relationship. All these women are oppressed. These African women are oppressed. These Chinese women are oppressed. Yeah. Of course, yes. When it comes to certain practices, yes. But this is like deployed specifically to define the native as savage and to like justify our civilization, our false elevation, right? So this is what's tricky about these like discourses of authenticity.
I think it comes back to the idea of that the thing we mentioned earlier with the connotations and emphasis, because even harmful gender practices, yes, they do exist and they are there, but I think we're emphasizing on those because we could attend to them, but there are so many valuable cultural values that we tend to forget. Say, for instance, in the northern region of Ethiopia, a husband doesn't eat before his wife actually magrasses him. Mm-hmm. So the first gursha of every meal is actually given to him by his wife. Mm-hmm. So that's why they have a hard time. It's part of their grieving ritual as well. Like they actually have poems that they say when they're grieving the death of the wife. So I think that we're emphasizing on it, and we're also making associations in the wrong way without considering the nuances of things. Like you said, every cultural practice has a story behind it, and the story is the one that should be challenged after understanding it. Mm. You guys,
Right.
So the whole idea of the authentic Ethiopian or the authentic African has been dominated by the connotations that have been emphasized over our bad practices rather than our good practices and the stories that come behind it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You guys get
absolutely.
Also, like, there's this thing that a lot of people think that in Africa, not a lot of people are educated, and they get surprised when they meet educated people, and actually people who speak good English. Because I've had a lot of people come up to me and it's like, have you ever been to America? Have you ever been to this state? I'm like, no, I'm educated. So, like, we have these connotations, these ideologies of what a particular state is based on the experiences we've had, or what a lot of people have told us is what Africa is. Right. So, like, when you come here, when you're here, you kind of experience different things, and you're just, like, surprised.
Right. I mean, at the very least, it's condescending, right? At the very least, it's condescending. Yeah. But it's actually beyond that. It's very, very dangerous, right? Like how long is Africa supposed to be defined as not having electricity or not having, and does that not kind of play into the ego of the places that colonized or first of all, because they get to say, well, see, they are inferior, So, right, there was a reason that we were in a position to, and we were actually helping them. And without us, and a lot of Africans have this mentality, without Europeans, they can't go anywhere because they'll be fighting these civil. There's a reason that there are so many civil wars in Africa, as many people have pointed out, in places that have the most resources, and that those resources, because of the conflicts, a lot of the wealth from those resources tend to end up in European pockets, right?
Yeah.
It's like often foreigners are behind this, or at least they're contributing to it, right? So,
I think we should take charge of the story and actually challenge the each beat about it. And then, because stories precede us, like you guys mentioned, when tourists come here, they have a preconception of what the experience would be like. What that tells us is our stories, perverted, have reached the tourists before we did. And
right.
the stories are the ones that we should take charge of. And even with the practices, if we could help them understand the story behind it, it would make it easier for us to make the change from the harmful practices, but also make a better story that when they come to like Ethiopia or Africa, they will have a fulfilling and pleasantly not surprising experience. Like what I hate the most is not the surprise, it's the element of it's what brought the element of surprise. It's like you said, when people
the assumptions that they have going into it, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like you being able to speak in another language does not make you skilled.
Right.
The fact that they're shocked by that makes me surprised, because where I come from, there's indefinite knowledge way ahead of the rest of the world.
Right.
So me being able to learn stuff shouldn't be a new thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
All human beings can learn wherever they're born. Or stuff
absolutely.
like that. Also, it's like when you travel to a different place, you have to be able to clear your mind of all expectations you have of that place, because regardless of whatever any other person's experience was in that place, your experience is always going to be different. It's always going to be different because it will be based on your perspective, what you've gone through in life, what people have told you about that place and stuff like that. So if you could clear your mind of all expectations and just remain present in that particular moment and remain present in what's happening around you, you could have a better experience wherever you're going.
I agree. It's funny because Mika a couple times has brought up this idea of stories.
Yeah.
Stories, which is interesting because I somebody who studied history, studied literature. I love a good story. That's what I live for. So hearing technical people interested in design, like it's through design that I got into stories, right? Is encouraging to me, because one of the things we talk about on the station a lot is the importance of restoring the liberal arts and appreciation and arts and all that. And that not everything worth learning is science, technology, engineering, or math. Like a bunch, like a material thing. There's more to it, right? Than just building stuff or just science or. But like when we talk about narratives, this goes back to Masayib. In terms of stories, I don't know if people realize, as a literature person, in Romeo and Juliet, when he first sees Juliet, he relates her to the beauty of an Ethiop's ear. He uses the word Ethiop, which means Ethiopia, right? I believe in Milton, in Chaucer, obviously in the Bible. At the core of Western tradition, they always refer to Ethiopia. Always.
Yeah.
I think in the Epic of Gilgamesh, right, in Homer, there's all these like references, one way or another, to Ethiopia. In Spartacus, the film, there's I think the first guy he has to kill, the other slave, is an Ethiopian, right? Because the Romans said. So what is this term, Ethiopian? This might be offensive, but again, it's necessary, right? Obviously, Utopia and Ethiopia have the same ending, right? Because Opia is a Greek ending, right? So the word Ethiopia is the land of Ethiops, right? It's the land of the dark-skinned people, and it's this sort of faraway, like Abyssinia, like faraway sort of exotic land. They're not literally thinking about this particular territory. I don't think Shakespeare knew where Ethiopia was on a map. They didn't have maps probably, or accurate ones. But like the fact that we are defined as Ethiopia, Masayim, our title to the rest of the world, is not an Ethiopian word, right? It's very much a Western, and we have to kind of contest with that we even define ourselves now based on the titles, the brands that are attributed to us by everyone. That's usually how it works. I'll give you one other example, a disturbing one. A Native American friend of mine is from the Shoshone tribe. He speaks English only. He doesn't speak Spanish. But when he mentioned it, I'm Shoshone, to a Spanish person, as a certain dialect, they're like, oh my God. Because Shoshone is like trash. It's like an insult. It was a term their real name for themselves is Nua. But when they attribute themselves, they have to call themselves by an insult. That is like a term of disparagement, just like gypsy, just like bar, right? So usually not only are you defined by the titles that are attributed to you by the other, but those are often terms of disparagement, for better or for worse.
Yeah, and you could also change the connotation of that word. Like the N-word, for example. For a white person using the N-word, that's a big no-no. But when a black person uses it, then it could be also a term of endearment. They use it in different things. So like the label, you can change the label in whatever fits your particular experience, and that does not really need to affect someone else. And in the cases that it does, you need to be careful about how you're expressing that, because not only are you an individual, you're also part of a community, and you have to like consider both sides, integrate both values, so that like you can find the best way to exist or survive or have the best experience in this world.
Right. It's not just the term of endearment, it's also to disempower. Disempower, what you were saying?
Definitely. So when you guys were talking, I was thinking about, the symbol of swastika, the one that everybody most predominantly associates with the Nazi symbol. Right. It's actually a very spiritual symbol that you could surprisingly find even in
Lalibela.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
So
I've seen the swastikas on Lalibela.
Right? So
but it's reversed, right? It's
no, it has extensions.
The direction is different, right? The Nazis is like they flipped around that.
They put it in a diagonal, but then like you can kind of relate. So the idea behind it is that stories actually evolve. So when it started out, like I told you, the swastika symbol was very spiritual. It is meant to represent spirituality and balance. And then there was a time when Hitler came into power, he was given, this is going to be a funny story, he was given a set of logo options. Literally, as I'm telling you.
Wow. Okay, continue.
So Hitler, being the artist that he was,
right.
he's a failed artist, by the way. So he chose that because it was very well balanced and it represented something that is firm and balanced, which was the idea that it was trying to push onto people. And then you all know how the story goes. So whenever we see it now,
it's a negative connotation, yes.
So so what I'm trying to say is the idea behind Africa or Ethiopia is the great ideas were preceding. So the references you were mentioning, we had the biggest civilization and we stood up, we almost represented the idea of black people. Besides Nubians, we're frequently referred to. Right. So back then, the stories were predominantly of the good, and most people understood that about us, and that was the one emphasized. It's not like we didn't have problems back then, but then now, right, and so between then and now, a lot of catastrophes happened, and then our weaknesses, so to speak, were emphasized. So when people think of Africa or Ethiopia, they have an image that emphasizes on our weaknesses or like bad qualities, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a solution, what I would suggest, and being a graphic designer and being a young person, what I would put everybody into becoming responsible is stories do evolve. Stories that are told well and stories that are told most often become the connotation for that label. So I think that it's incumbent on us that we need to rewrite the story, make sure that most people relate to it, like do it in a way that engages people. I'm not saying like let's release encyclopedias, but do it in an engaging way, just like a conversation we're having right now, so that the narrative changes and the tourists are surprised by the right things. We still want them to be surprised.
Yes, sure.
But so stories do evolve. And I think that personally, we should really challenge the stories that we base our assumptions on. Because some of those stories wouldn't last like a simple math. And I'm a big fan of stories, and I can never stop talking about it.
Yeah, in light of that, like what came to mind is also like the reason that Ethiopia is mentioned in a lot of religious books and in a lot of religions, I believe, is because everybody is kind of accepted when you come to Ethiopia. There's not a really it's on the Quran where like Muhammad and his disciples came to Ethiopia to hide, and then it's also in the Bible where like Ethiopia. I think it's on the Bible, right? Yes. So like here, what I've experienced is like everybody's kind of accepted in their own way. It's not full acceptance, obviously. We're all different people. But you can come here and live, and you'll find people that are like you, at least. So it's like that feeling of home wherever you go exists here in Ethiopia, I feel. Yeah.
Emphasizing on the accommodation bit of our story and the
Exactly.
fact that we were hungry at some point.
We were all hungry somewhere.
Defining people based on disparagement.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay, so thank you. I think that's a good place for us to stop right now. I think we're out of time. But both of you, thank you so much for coming on and sharing things that you've learned recently. Please feel free. This is a home to all of us. So anytime you guys want to stop by, and we appreciate everybody for listening as well. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
It's been a real
Thank
pleasure.
you.